Good morning to those who are here in person and to those who are have joined us online. It is really a momentous day for us to be gathered here, really to talk about, among other things, the 135th anniversary of the Second Morrill Act. And to really speak to us on this very important topic at this very critical time in history is Dr. Carolyn Brooks, who is a native of Richmond, Virginia, but she is also a product of the land grant system. She received her BS and MS from Tuskegee University in biology, and then proceeded to the Ohio State University for her PhD. She then joined UMES way back in 1981, and she's grown up the ranks as a faculty member, grown on to become chair and continued on and became dean, the position that I currently hold, and moved even beyond that to become the executive assistant to the president and chief of staff. On leaving UMES, Dr. Brooks became the executive director of the Association of Research Directors. This is a group that brings together all the ag and food-related deans from across the 1980-90 land grant universities. Dr. Brooks has really played a critical role in the land grant systems. He's achieved many accolades over the years. I was delighted when she was named by the Board of Regents as Professor Emerita, and of course Dean Emerita here at UMES. She's received many professional awards, including from the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture, being named into the Hall of Fame. She's been recognized as as one of Maryland's top 100 women, featured in the Distinguished African American Scientists of the 20th Century, and received an Award of Excellence in Science and Technology from the White House Initiative for Historically Black Universities. She has received many other awards over the years. She has published more than 50 journal papers and served on numerous national panels over the years and councils and boards. She's served as a consultant program evaluator for universities in at least 9 states and 8 different countries. Her research has allowed her to conduct research in 5 African countries. Dr. Brooks is actively engaged in service to the community through environmental advocacy boards, her church, and the Princess Anne chapter of the Links Incorporated. She and her husband, Dr. Henry Brooks, are proud parents of 4 outstanding children, 6 grandchildren, and 2 great-granddaughters. And I will also say I stand here because Dr. Brooks strongly encouraged me to apply for the dean position here.
I did good.
Without much ado, I invite you to speak to those who are gathered here as well as those who are gathered online.
Thank you. Good morning. And thank you to Dr. Carol, to Shonda Harris, and the committee for inviting me to be a part of this 135th anniversary celebration of the Second Morrill Act. It brings great joy to me to see so many of my friends here today, and I'm also thrilled to see you students. But I have to also say hello to my 1890 friends watching from Never Never Land. Henry and I still miss you tremendously. And I sincerely thank those of you who are not in these 3 categories, but have given of your precious time to come hear me talk as we celebrate the 1890s. Thank you. And before I give my talk, I'd like to show you some slides to refresh our memories of who Justin Morrill is who are land-grant institutions, and what's so special about the 1890s. So I'd like to start here with the slides. I'm a little rusty. Where's the tape? What's that? See, it wasn't me. Thank you. Okay, we are here to celebrate the 135th anniversary of the signing of the Second Morrill Act. And the theme for the 1890s is 135 years strong, celebrating legacy, growing opportunities, inspiring innovation, and empowering communities. Now let's see why land-grant universities needed to be established. In the early 1800s, higher education was still modeled after the European institutions. You know, the first one was Harvard. What they were doing was educated the white male leisure class, rich folks. They went to college, or they were educating government and religious leaders, or sometimes they were educating members of the professions. And that would be like your lawyers and your doctors and your teachers. But there were calls for change from two particular men, Jonathan Baldwin Turner and Justin Morrill. They wanted education to be a vehicle for opportunity. They wanted practical education. They wanted higher education for the world's business. They wanted to bring science and discovery to America's farms. Now, they're talking so much about farms then because we were an agrarian society. There were, particularly at this time, in 1862, there were 31 million Americans, that's all. 60% of those were connected to agriculture, and 80% of the population was rural. So that's what the land grants, agricultural emphasis was so important in the 1800s. So these are these two men that I'm talking about. The one with the beard, and he lived to be, what, 93 years old, and the other one lived to be 88 years old. We need to know what they had in their drinks. But anyway, the Jonathan Baldwin Turner was a missionary. He was an abolitionist. He was a minister. He was a college professor, and he was an agriculturalist. But he had attended an elitist institution. He was a graduate of Yale. Justin Morrill was also an abolitionist, but he was a politician from Vermont, and he had been one for 43 years. First, he started as in the House of Representatives and then as a Senate. And so he was in a better position to bring about this change in America than was Jonathan Baldwin. He had no education, he was self-taught. So this is what the Morrill Act was all about. It was a protest against the dominance of the classics in higher education. Now, those leisure class folks that were going to college, they were learning Greek and Latin and geometry and ancient history and logic and ethics. And I looked up this rhetoric because that was part of it. That meant public speaking. And Turner and Baldwin wanted to develop college-level instruction that related to the practical realities of an agricultural and industrial society. This is the quote that is often used with them. Invest in a well-educated citizenry, a skilled workforce. Educate the common man. Now, I'm going to be using common man a lot in this talk because it started with Justin Morrill, but I guess what we call today the common man is the working class. So Morrill proposed, this is where the land grant terminology came from. He proposed granting 30,000 acres to each state, all of the states in the United States, and use that land to either sell and get the money to elevate the college that you already had, or if you don't have a college, then use that money to start building a college. But these proceeds had to be used to teach agricultural and mechanical arts as well as military tactics. Now, the legislation came about twice. The first time it didn't pass. It went through President James Buchanan. And it didn't pass because some Southerners didn't like it and they had talked him into vetoing it. So Baldwin vetoed it. But then came Abraham Lincoln. It was 1861. and the Civil War had started. And you see what I have written down there in red, the military science, that probably bucked up Abraham Lincoln's eyes a lot, because we're talking about now educating your soldiers. So in 1861, he introduced, amidst the Civil War, provisions to establish public institutions that would focus teaching in areas of engineering, agriculture, and military science. And so this was the first Morrill Act, and it was the Morrill Act of 1862, and it was passed by Lincoln on July 2nd, 1862. Now, I'm not going to read all of this, but I'm going to try to summarize what the colors say. The first one says is that these are the expectations of the Morrill Act, that every state will receive funding to have a perpetual foundation. So we like that. It's really a federally mandated college. The next one is accessible to all, but especially to the sons of toil. Now, who were the sons of toil, but those who were the farmers at the time? In the green part, he was trying to say, we want holistic students. We don't just want to teach agriculture and mechanical arts. We know we have to teach science and English and history and social studies and all those things. And that's fine with me. But the important thing is what you see in the purple. And that is, we want to study science of agriculture in such a way that we will elevate to the highest level in the world in agricultural sciences. He wanted the agriculturalists to be really educated and be the most advanced in the world. So this is that was 1862. But now we're talking about 28 years later. Slaves had been freed. And this is the quote that I like to use for Justin Morrill. He was now a senator. And he said, having emancipated a whole race, shall it be said that there our duty ends, leaving the race as cumberers of the ground, to live or to wilt and perish, as the case may be. They are members of the American family, and their advancement concerns us all. While swiftly forgetting all they ever knew as slaves, shall they have no opportunity to learn anything as freemen. So he had already said earlier in the first Morrill Act that these institutions had to be accessible to all. The freed slaves are now citizens of the United States. So what about them? And so somebody would want to say, well, you know, in some states you couldn't even teach slaves to read. Now you want to bring them to college? Well, by the time he wrote that, by 1870, there were approximately 1,000 schools for African Americans. So they had surely begun to read and write. So this is what the Morrill Act provided first before the compromise. They said that there would be no money paid out under this act to any state or territory for the support of maintenance of the college where there is a distinction of race or color. That was part of that Morrill Act. Well, there were southern and border states who didn't like the idea of saying that we have to admit African Americans. The University of Maryland and the University of Delaware were two of those border states, and the rest were southern states. So that's why we have an 1890 in Maryland. So there had to be some kind of compromise, because this is money coming to these states. States don't turn away money. So what do I need to do so I can still get this land grant money? And what they were told is that in states that refuse to admit colored students, they could establish separate colleges for white and colored students, so long as the funds received would be equitably divided. Now, you know, they were not equitably divided, but they got some money. Okay, so now in the state of Maryland we're talking about, we have an 1862, which is the University of Maryland, and we have the 1890, which is the University of Maryland Institute. Just to show you, those of you who are not familiar with land-grant institutions, remember they started off as just one in every state. But you'll see that we now have 112 universities or colleges that are in the land-grant system. And this is an enviable position for a university or a college to be in. There are 57 1862s, but you know that we got 50 states. Well, the institutions that were established that are territories are classified as 1862 institutions, which is kind of funny because there are two HBCUs, the University of Virgin Islands and what's the other one? UDC. They are HBCUs, but they're classified as 1862s. The rest of us, the 19 of us, the great ones, we were called the Negro Land Grant Colleges. And I don't know if I'll show you the slide with the states. But they finally recognized that there still was another population that they had really done badly, and that was the Native Americans. So in 1994, they established. I don't think they have, maybe one that's a university. Most of them are classified as colleges, but there are 36 of those now, and they were established for the Native American students. So this is just a map, and to let you know, those of you who don't know much about what land grant means. And a quick look, because I won't call all of these. If you wanted to know who are the 1890 institutions, this slide shows you. There's one unusual thing to say, however. Alabama has 2 land-grant institutions. So the official name of the 1890s is the 1890 Land-Grant Universities and Tuskegee University. All of them are public except Tuskegee. Tuskegee is a private institution, but everybody knows the history that Tuskegee has with agriculture, and they had George Washington Carver. What else could you do but make this a primary land-grant institution? So that's why we have 2 in Alabama. So the 1890s are extremely wonderful university. It is a collaborative of 19 institutions, and the faculty know each other, and the administrators know each other, and the students know each other. What a better environment to be in than to be in something like that. They coalesce the talents of their researchers, and so the resources that we have in the 1890 community can be expanded. We certainly, as small institutions, don't have enough to do really big things. So sometimes we have to work with our counterparts, and particularly in 1890, because we have such similar missions. They intellectually cross-pollinate between different and individual institutional contexts. And so they have a bolder, more robust research fundable ideas. I think they've gotten those really high-level ideas to get money from the government. I don't know what's going to happen with that kind of money now, but to have all of that money and to have all these institutions working together so they could compete. Otherwise, these small institutions just can't compete with the giant institutions. These are really old slides, and I apologize, Dr. Caro, but I had them in my file. And these are examples how we coalesce our talents intellectually and we cross-pollinate. I have 2 examples here of a biennial research symposium that the 1890s engaged in. All of the institutions come together there. The participants number about 1,000. The first one these 2 pictures are just of students. It's not faculty and administrators and so forth. And the first one was in Jacksonville, and the bottom one was in Atlanta. And the students that you see with plaques, these were the students that won 1st, 2nd, or 3rd place. Now, you can't go to this conference just to look around. You got to go to this conference being prepared to give a talk or to show a talk. And so these are just 2 examples of some pictures I found. The young lady on the one side is showing her poster presentation, and the other is doing an oral presentation. And then they come together. Look, this just looks amazing to me, to have all these institutions so well connected with each other. And this is a picture of the award ceremony. The students will be awarded the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place award. They get monetary money if they get the top awards anyway. But it's also sort of like a friendly competition to see how many institutions get the most awards or something. But these are the students that you see that do that. They come together for workshops after that, and we make sure that we try to get them to engage with each other enough that they can become friends across these boundaries of states. This is an old as dirt poster, but it was the only one I could find, but it shows you how we also get them together in social events. So I thought I would nicely, friendlily embarrass my friend, Dr. Anugra Shaw, but I wanted to show you that the faculty do the same thing as the students. They present so their colleagues can find out what they're doing all over, and they can learn from them and talk to each other and work together. And Dr. Shaw at this time won her 1st place. Show your hand, Dr. Shaw. Okay, so this is a statistical portrait of the 1890s. We have a total enrollment of about 117,000 students. 75% of them are African Americans, and the majority of them qualify for Pell Grant. There are about 7,300 that graduate every year in the food and agricultural sciences. And to show you how well we do with our small number, now remember we got 112 institutions, but 51% of all degrees awarded to African Americans in agriculture come from the 1890s. And on average, the 1890s graduate about 37,000 students every year. There are 5 campuses that are pretty good sized campuses. These campuses have student enrollments of 8,500 to 13,500. But most of the 1890 colleges enroll about 3,000 to 5,000 students. And the average faculty student ratio is 1 to 20. And then this is important to know because everybody thinks that institutions are taking money from you, there's some citizens who think that and all. But the 19 institutions contribute $7 billion a year in economic impact, demonstrating the critical role they play in supporting local, state, and national economies. So we aren't taking everything, we're giving back more than we are getting in. This is an old programming goal for research and extension. It probably has better writing on it now, but anyway, it means the same, that we are trying to improve the standard of living and financial well-being of individual families, communities, small-scale limited resource and socially disadvantaged farmers and landowners. And the research that is done, there's other research that we do for Prestigious Journal, but the research that is done here is thought about with the applied aspect in mind. That's what Morrill wanted us to do. Work with the people, do the work of the people. So I'm not going to go over this list, but I did do some research to find out what the majority of the research productivity in terms of publications are from the 1890s and found this article. So I'm sure you've had time to browse down and see what those areas are. And this is just an old picture to show sometimes you seeing things of what we do in the food and agricultural sciences works out better if you see it. We work with watermen, so you can see at the top with extension. You can see us working with landowners down at the bottom, talking to them, the farmers or the landowners. In the middle, everybody knows what 4-H is and how wonderful it is that we have something on this campus that can go into the school system and work with them. Work with small farmers, and at the bottom, work with all seniors and trying to get food security and everything else that we do through cooperative extension. And the research goals are to advance knowledge for agriculture, the environment, human health and well-being, energy independence, and communities. So what I've said so far, because I got to be talking in a minute, was just to show you, this is a nice picture, just how wonderful the 1890s are. And it's hard for me to think that you could have not seen those films and felt the collaborative spirit that they have and the relationship they have and how special that is. So now I want to politely, I'm hoping I can do this politely, ask the spokespersons of our 1890 campuses, including officials, recruiters, student ambassadors, etc., that while you take great pride in boasting about high visibility programs on our campuses, as you most certainly should, there's a difference in when the campus was founded and when it became an 1890. And our oldest 1890 campus was founded in 1871. So in over 100 years, these campuses have instituted many, many, many excellent program offices besides the agricultural sciences. But spokespersons, please take in boasting about the agricultural and human sciences as well, and especially during this 135th anniversary. Those of us affiliated with such programs feel slighted sometimes because while agricultural sciences might not always get the same spotlight as high-tech or medical sciences, it's important to remember that agriculture is deeply integrated with cutting-edge technologies and innovations, and that we have the explicit responsibility of service to our communities through cooperative extension. From genetic engineering and precision farming to sustainable practices and data-driven solutions, agricultural sciences are as sophisticated and forward-thinking as any other scientific field. In fact, they're at the forefront of tackling some of the world's greatest challenges, such as food security, climate change, food health relationships, and sustainable development. So agricultural sciences are not only essential, agricultural sciences are an evolving, high-tech field and blends tradition with the future. We simply ask that when our campuses are spotlighted in the public, the sophistication and relevance of agricultural sciences should also be in that spotlight, recognizing the importance of the technology and innovation that drive the field forward. And as we recognize this 135th anniversary, please remember who or what brought us to the dance. So that's all I wanted to say about that little part. And then I'm going to go to my little talk. So in repeating the slides, Justin Morrill, the father of the land-grant university system, was a visionary of his time, and his cause was educating the masses. We are now in a time when higher education is dangerously under threat by a political climate and lacks public support by millions of citizens who view higher education as too woke and represents only the views of the elite. In the last election, the nation voted for many conservatives. And in general, many conservatives view higher education as elite and woke for several reasons that are rooted in cultural, political, racial, and social differences. Additionally, the high cost of college and the increasing gap between those with a college education and those without has led to a perception that universities serve as elite privileged class, and they are disconnected from the everyday experiences of working class or rural Americans. So I guess if they understand what land-grant universities are, maybe they would be more accepting of them. Many conservatives argue that higher education is out of touch with rural and working class values, claiming that universities emphasize social theories and global perspectives over practical skills relevant to everyday life or the local economy. This disconnect fosters a perception that universities are isolated from the concerns of the broader public and reinforces accusations of elitism. Again, land-grant universities are supposed to be what these critics say elite colleges are not. Lord, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's important to remember that land-grant universities were established through political action. They began as federally funded institutions of higher education. It is pretty clear that there are political forces now that are shaping policies, funding, and societal attitudes toward education. And I stress societal attitudes because some of the current shenanigans are just fine with millions of Americans. I can't keep up with the attack on the Department of Education, dismantle it, abolish it, diminish it, whatever. There are clearly dire consequences to HBCUs and public school systems because of what is happening to what remains of the Department of Education. The land-grant university programs, however, get their continuous funding from the Farm Bill for the U.S. Department of Education, also called the People's Department. And the funds are for food and agricultural sciences in teaching, in research, and cooperative extension, and for indirect program funding for other program needs like facilities. However, the new administration has now cut programs in the USD budget also for what I call despicable reasons. For example, the USDA's Forest Service has been a very strong and continuous supporter of the 1890s, but recently informed the 1890 Foundation that a $35 million grant for the 1890s was terminated, saying that the USDA, and this is the quote, no longer effectuates agency priorities regarding DEI inclusion program activities, end of the quote. So in summary, close the grant right now. This is yet another example of this administration's tendency to lump anything related to supporting minorities under the broad label of DEI, but they are not the same. And I fully support both. DEI initiatives aim to make the broader higher education landscape more inclusive, while separate funding for HBC programs provides essential support to institutions dedicated to doing the same thing that the predominantly white institutions receive support to do, but on a more level playing field. It's not either or, it's both. And the two types of programming deserve to be recognized as distinct but equally important efforts. So with all the mess going on and the government dismantling that which will take years to build up again, the 1890s must remain vigilant, apprehensive, and proactive, since they know other major funding challenges are soon to come. Today's public sentiment about education has dropped down to being comfortable with seeing that the gains that had been made against discrimination and unequal access are no longer in place. The impact of this is that it gets harder and harder for marginalized students to have access to higher education. And as we continue to lose important ground that has been gained, we start reverting back more and more to an inequitable society. And how does what is happening now politically affect Morrill's doctrine as he fought for investing in a well-educated citizenry, a skilled workforce, educate the common man? Morrill was thinking about more than humanistic values when he wanted to educate the masses, and even said that if college had been educated the agrarian society earlier than his reform, the U.S. taxable income would have been far greater, more abundant, and more variable. But we instead seem to now be in a political climate that prioritizes certain sectors and economic priorities over education. And to fund those priorities, the federal government needs money, and slashes to budgets in higher education can shift that money their way, leading to fewer resources for world-renowned research, academic programs, and student support services. This big wave of anti-DEI attacks is also taking place even as the American population is changing demographically, becoming more and more diverse than recorded in previous years. And it is not just the federal government attacking DEI. Since 2023, at least 157 bills explicitly attacking DEI in education have been introduced across 34 of our states. And today, at least 15 states have enacted these bans and restrictions into law. And as opponents attempt to redefine what DEI stands for and morph their intent into political narratives, the basic definition of these terms must be remembered. Recognizing differences, ensuring fairness, and creating a sense of belonging, all practices necessary to address the needs of an ever-diversifying public. But one good thing to note is that some colleges, those that value diversity, have already adjusted their admissions criteria to maintain diversity by focusing more on socioeconomic or geographic diversity. If there is a will, there is a way. And I thought I'd never hear myself giving a big shout out to Harvard University, but it sure is great that their riches might help the rest of us without these resources to put up the fight against the horrific overreach of government on education. Come on, elite colleges, follow Harvard's lead and use your billions to fight too. One more point to consider during these challenging times is having our nation being run by billionaires. Primarily right now, one billionaire, the one who is the richest man on earth. We also must consider what are the effects of the growing economic divide in this country. I am so disheartened when I hear people say, we need rich businessmen to run our country. Businessmen are typically focused on profits, efficiency, and growth, while running a country involves managing complex societal issues, balancing the needs of diverse groups, and working within a system of checks and balances. In governance, leaders are expected to prioritize fairness, justice, equality, and the protection of rights, which are not always aligned with business practices or profit motives. Billionaires will emphasize market-driven solutions that could deepen existing inequalities rather than investing in programs that address poverty, healthcare, and education, issues which require political leadership that prioritizes equity and social well-being. Thus, when the government enables billionaires to amass greater wealth and power, it often comes at the expense of the common man. If wealthy businessmen are to be involved in government, this is my opinion, they should serve in advisory roles, not positions of power. All that I have spoken about has great implications for land-grant universities and colleges because we were established so that the common man can have access to education and subsequently have opportunities for socioeconomic growth and can realize the American dream. But the land-grant mission has also been compromised by what the higher education sector has done to itself, with some, but certainly not all, 1862 land-grant universities becoming elite colleges themselves. The heck to all that educate the common man stuff that they were funded to do by the federal government 163 years ago. Many flagship land-grant universities have put that goal, that mission, on the back burner. According to a New York Times article, flagship campuses view themselves as semi-private colleges that define themselves not by inclusion, but by how many applicants they turn away. They compete for high-income students, high-achieving students, while overlooking low-income students who are perfectly able to succeed in college. Although public colleges, like the land-grants, have usually played second fiddle to the elitist US private universities, at least they used to be more affordable, and access to these campuses used to be at least commendable. Admittedly, because of severely cut state budgets, they had to raise tuition, so now they are much harder to afford. And then along came the rankings game. Unfortunately, it was the private, elitist institutions that crafted this ranking system and positioned themselves to be the models of higher education, and consequently moved us back to higher education elitism once more. The college ranking system, and you know what that is in world news, US news and world reports every year, heavily influenced by the metrics like endowment size, selectivity, and faculty research output. And when we talk about research, we mean research that leads to patents and research that leads to technological innovations and AI and things like that. The descriptors would not match expected land-grant university practice in several significant ways. The first would be misalignment of the mission to provide accessible, practical education to the general public, particularly in agriculture, engineering, and the sciences. The ranking system, however, favors universities that prioritize research and prestige over accessibility and community service. Next, the ranking system often places a high premium on large endowments and selective admissions processes, and affordability is not adequately recognized. Next, land-grant universities often focus on practical and community-oriented research that directly benefits local economies and industries, especially in agriculture, technology, and public service. Rankings prioritize publications in prestigious journals and not on research that addresses everyday needs of people. Next, many land-grant universities, in an attempt to climb in the rankings, feel pressure to divert resources toward areas that are valued in ranking at the expense of their core mission of teaching and community service. This can lead to an erosion of the quality of undergraduate teaching. And finally, the ranking system encourages a culture of competition rather than collaboration. Land-grant universities were historically created to work together for the greater good of the nation, just as the 1890s do. So when the rankings come out, at the top are a list of universities more similar to the Ivy Leagues, which are old and rich and private universities that enroll kids who have had the best education money can buy since they were toddlers. And that's where the rich send their children to school. A recent study revealed that the entering class of the top US universities had 3% of its freshmen from the bottom income quartile, 6% from the second income quartile, 17% from the third income quartile, and that is probably the middle class, upper middle class, and a whopping 74% came from the top income quartile. You go to school and you bump into rich folks every day, everywhere, just rich folks all over, 74%. So yes, if institutions are going to be ranked high because they only admit diamonds in academic diamonds or those who have diamonds, then that's a great shame. I happen to think it's more outstanding and thus deserving of high rankings if an institution can turn students who are academic diamonds in the rough into well-educated, prosperous citizens than to take in students who are so smart you don't even have to teach them well. They'll learn anyway, or the rich, and they can hire rich people to keep them prosperous. So, but the elite institutions have devised this ranking system to make them come out on top every year. And now many of our land-grant institutions are trying to do the same. But Morrill is high up on my list of heroes because he and his supporters wanted to get away from just educating the elite and wanted to educate the common man, crossing socioeconomic and racial barriers. Today's universities do not even want to consider taking in underprepared students from poorly performing school districts. Morrill wanted to even admit free slaves, even though it had been illegal in a lot of states to teach them to read. But we are here to celebrate the 1890s. Because of all I have said, you can see why they should be celebrated. They are still passionately dedicated to being a ladder, not a filter to opportunity and higher education. They know for sure that education makes a difference in whether you can walk through the doors of opportunity instead of just knocking. Our campuses are primarily made up of first-generation socioeconomically disadvantaged students. And about 85 to 90% of our students receive financial aid. And on average, at least 50% of them qualify for Pell Grants, a measure of very low economic status. But the 1890s must be vigilant. When the state looks at data, they react with concern if they see low retention and graduation rates, or see low test scores and GPAs of entering students, our diamonds in the rough. Like everyone else, 1890s want exceptional students and faculty, and understand that prestige is often the reward for academic and research excellence. And providing remediation to support students who came from underperforming schools requires resources that could be allocated to other much-needed areas. And faculty also say that poor kids today are not like poor kids of yesteryear. Many of these first-generation college students come from families that do not value education, or many of the kids have low expectations of themselves. It's hard to ignite their passion for learning so late in the game. So do the 1890s, the campuses who passionately care about underserved populations, start giving up on these students? Certainly not. Studies already show these underserved, underprepared students need more than coursework. They need mentoring and they need nurturing. HBCUs are still proud to say they do just that. I was passionate about just that throughout my career in higher education. I was a first-generation college student myself, and I have written book chapters about the stress of having to overperform or outperform to be successful at a predominantly white institution, as I did as a PhD student at The Ohio State University. But what has begun to shock me when I try to be a part of the world that wants to help, I run across students who have no dreams at all. I read a blog once in which a white student said, if you know you will be able to go to college when you graduate from high school, you take your middle school and your high school courses more seriously. But can you imagine working hard, buckling down to do well in your classes in middle school and on without that goal in mind? Why would you? Students at HBCUs come with other baggage too, like no money. Some students come to HBCUs so broke, they can't buy a mosquito or wrestling jacket. That has to be mighty naive to think that you can come to college and everything is going to be free. So how does that affect graduation and retention rates? The truth is that now most capable low and middle income students attend community colleges or four-year colleges close to home that are low on their list of colleges they wanted to attend. Research has shown that doing so makes them less likely to graduate from college at all. So to retain them, the 1890s must take seriously their mentoring and their nurturing responsibilities, making them happy when they come. Many students come with baggage that is hard to shake and do not only have to work hard academically, they also have psychological, financial, and social problems that they need to combat at the same time. Accessibility, though, is still the guiding principle for 1890 institutions, and an impressive body of evidence suggests that these campuses have been able to create a campus climate that fosters student satisfaction, sense of community, and adjustment to college that increases the likelihood of persistence and degree completion. But in this political climate, the HBCUs have to refocus too and recast themselves in order to generate support from our politicians and our non-supportive citizens, and remind all that while there are just about only 100 HBCUs, and they enroll less than 18% of all African American enrollees from about 4,000 other U.S. institutions of higher education. Data show that African Americans attending the HBCUs are significantly more likely to graduate with a degree, pursue higher earning majors like STEM fields, and achieve greater career success compared to their peers at those thousands of non-HBCUs. Statistics also highlight that a large percentage of Black professionals in fields like medicine, law, and engineering are HBCU graduates. 11 of the 1890s awarded more degrees to African Americans than their same state counterparts. 4 of our 1890s were among the top 20 institutions in the nation awarding science and engineering degrees to Blacks. So going back, higher education is under attack now, and we take on our battles relating to the issues I have mentioned. As we take them on, let's reaffirm ourselves during the 135th anniversary of the Second Morrill Act. Morrill's vision must be readapted, reinvigorated, and reconceptualized. In New Mexico, with a population of 47% Hispanics and 10% Native Americans, the then president of New Mexico State, Michael Martin, said, "If the institutions specifically created to serve the common student do not do so, who will?" We need to be guided by what we know works, what we know is right, the Morrill Doctrine. If it could be done in 1862, when it had never been done before, and while we were engaged in a civil war, we can surely do it again with all the know-how we have from our history. We are here to celebrate the successes in spite of the challenges, because throughout 135 years of existence as land-grant institutions, 1890s learned that success can be fleeting. So they don't sit back on their laurels, but instead keep driving to keep what they have and build on it. 1890s have done that with over 135 years of excellent leadership. Leaders who are and were the presidents, the deans, the research directors, the extension administrators, the family and consumer sciences administrators, the deans and directors of our libraries, the directors of international programs, and of course, the faculty, the students, and the staff who have over the years stayed the course and excelled at what they do. Those of us who love HBCUs feel frustrated when progress made by marginalized groups is challenged or reversed, because the concept of success can be deeply personal and shaped by various factors. And after a lot of resilience and perseverance to achieve success, setbacks come all too frequently. Viewing success can mean pushing past adversity and focusing on the work that is essential in the fight for the common man. And all of us individually have to be in that fight. Like Michelle Obama said, do something. So despite the challenges, let us see success as the ability to inspire, to lead, and continue fighting for justice and equality, and being proud to successfully educate our diamonds in the rough. Success often isn't just about overcoming the obstacles, but also about continuing to push forward for continued greatness and inspire others to do the same. The 1890s have been guided by the vision of Justin Morrill and countless of those who fight for the common man, particularly as we think about heroes during Black History Month. We must put an end to those attempts to erase the history that tells how we rose above the horrors of slavery, and by telling our history, boldly celebrate our triumphs and powerful contributions that we have made to the foundation and greatness of this nation. And the 1890s will keep moving on. The 1890s are an indispensable investment in this nation's fabric, and I am elated to join with you in celebrating the remarkable achievements they have made, and in particular, my beloved UMES has made, and they will all continue to make indelible contributions that relate to the tripartite mission of teaching, research, and service, especially for the common man. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brooks. Any questions? And let me also just add that we had more than 70 participants online, and I've also asked them to pose questions after that.
Thank you for this fantastic job. I have one question. Have you considered running for the president in the next election?
I'm just glad to wake up and see a new day. That's as far as I can think. Oh, yes.
I'm just curious. Brilliant talk, by the way, but besides that, I'm just curious. We were founded in 1886.
Yes.
And then when we were absorbed as a 1890 institution, like how much land did we have in 1886?
Hey, that is a complaint. I don't know. Dr. Carol would probably answer these just as well than I could, but we both know it's not what you think. Go ahead.
So right now we have roughly just over 1,000 acres. But remember that states were given 30,000 acres to sell so they could raise money to actually do the construction. I don't think we were given any.
We didn't get any land. And we're lucky to get land now because of the Farm Bill, but that's not in the original writing from Morrill that we get land.
How much did we have? Whatever land we had,
that was it. You didn't get any more. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for coming out to hear me, and celebrate hard for the 1890 institutions.
Thank you.